Hey everybody, good evening, I guess, or good afternoon, just tail end of the afternoon. I thought I'll come in and uh, answer quite a few questions about the Rooming House Millionaire and about the book and about all things property investment. We even have some questions here around things like, the broader economic environment and what's going to happen with property kind of going forward. I'm live. It's not recorded or anything, although maybe you're watching the recording afterwards. So if you know, if you're watching the recording, just let me know you are. Let me know kind of where you are at the moment. You see me kind of looking at a couple of my screens here. We're live on a bunch of places. We're live on Instagram. We're live on Facebook. We are live on YouTube as well, and in a couple of kind of other channels. I think we're even on LinkedIn through our integration platform. But I thought I'll kind of jump in and answer kind of quite a few questions. We've got a few questions during the day, so I thought it will make sense to kind of start maybe with those. But I also have a list of my comments here. So if you're live and you feel you want to ask a few questions about investing in rooming houses, this might be your best time yet. All right, so we're gonna start with the first one, right? Is where should I buy my rooming house, or where should I build my rooming house? And I think that's a question that we get asked fairly often, because people, or some people, think there's some sort of kind of black magic where we have kind of a secret list of suburbs that maybe we can kind of go and kind of produce some kind of extraordinary results in. We can produce some pretty special results in some places, but there's not a single answer. Unfortunately, there's no silver bullet, no kind of black magic here. It's all kind of hard work and good research. So in terms of where, I think the biggest question most people actually struggle with, the question that we find we need to answer the most in many cases is a question of metropolitan Melbourne versus country Victoria. And we actually have here in the book, and I may actually kind of go get my copy of the book kind of here. Is one of the chapters that talks about site selection, and particularly around the strategy and the approach we use for site selection. You can see just over there. Let me see if you can see it. You can see there's our actual framework of how we pick places, how we pick location based on tenants and based on a number of things. And one of the things that you'll see as you explore that particular chapter and that particular approach is that there's two main classes. You can do this stuff in close to big cities, in our case, close to metropolitan Melbourne. You can also do this stuff in regional Victoria. Many of you know that my portfolio is heavily slanted towards regional Victoria, primarily because the cash flow is better. And again, in the book, I talk a little bit about what I've done and how I've done it. There's also quite a few kind of use cases towards the end that allow you to kind of get that balance correctly, that balance right, that allows you to have the right information to be able to have the right decision, I guess, right? So, all right, so let me just check that there's not any other questions. Like I said, we'll kind of tailor in some of the questions that we got during the day. Where did my comments go? There we go. So I don't have any other questions pending. Yeah, here's one. I guess it's pretty similar to the last one we had. It's kind of which areas give more rent. That's actually an important point. As you consider the whole metropolitan Melbourne versus regional Victoria thing, and you'll see there's a video we're publishing that talks a little bit about that specific area of the book. I think it's going out tomorrow. We recorded that a couple days ago. But as we consider that whole conundrum, we go and have a look at specific areas and the rent that those areas actually provide. Metropolitan Melbourne, the closer you are to the city, the higher the rent it's going to be. That's the short answer. However, the answer is more complicated than that, because what really ends up happening is as you get closer to Melbourne, the cost of the property is also incredibly higher, particularly because the land component becomes much more pricey. So the balance between rent and the cost of the property, the cost of land particularly, starts to get off kilter. So returns in regional Victoria are just better. I hope that kind of answers the question to whoever asked that question. All right, so if we go to the next question, is there a particular type of person that you prefer to rent your rooms to? I think that's kind of what it's saying there. So yeah, is there a preferred type of tenant? And again, great question that it's also answered, although admittedly more in passing through the stories in the Rooming House Millionaire. So one of the things that we had to do a lot of soul searching about, and that we have learned a lot about as we progress in our journey, I guess personally as investor, but also as a rooming house builder and a rooming house operator, is the fact that there's a bunch of types of tenants that can't live in a rooming house. In our YouTube channel, you'll find there's a long presentation, about an hour long, that covers kind of this type of space. There's 4 types of tenants that we normally see in the market. The first one is students, because everybody kind of can relate, and many of us have been students. Some of us have lived in places outside of home to go to university and things like that. So student accommodation is a pretty well-known kind of market. It is a pretty solid market if you forget 4 years of pandemic with no international students. But it's a market that is fairly competitive, and it's a market where you need to be in the right area, close to the right amenities, and close to the right, effectively, education sources and the right sort of universities and things like that. So we don't actually have too many of those. We have a few, but not too many properties in that market. The second area that everyone thinks, and largely responsible for the stigma of rooming houses in this country over the last 100 years, is welfare recipients, right? Or lower socioeconomic people. Effectively, people who live in a rooming house because they cannot afford anything else, and very, very likely they're receiving government benefits, sometimes unemployed, sometimes in crisis accommodation. Now, that particular market, which is really sort of, I don't want to say well known, but it's largely misunderstood. It's a market that can actually be quite profitable, but obviously with that type of tenant, there's a whole bunch of issues and a whole bunch of problems and a whole bunch of extra work, because sometimes there's behavioral issues, sometimes there's health issues, sometimes there's other types of kind of problems. So we tend not to focus on that market too much. We have a couple of properties that are targeted towards that dynamic because the owner of those properties wanted to leverage that market. But generally speaking, most of our properties are not rented to that type of people. Most properties are rented to two kinds of tenants, if you like, right? The first one is what we call young professionals. It's young people who just want to move away from home and maybe don't have the desire or the money to go and get their own property. That is kind of pretty common. It's probably the bulk of our tenants fall into that category. And those are guys who prefer to have a smaller space but still very high quality, and they're a perfect fit for a rooming house. And then the last group of tenants is single retirees. These are older people in the late season of their lives who, for whatever reason, now find themselves usually alone. Kids have grown up. Maybe they decide that they don't want the big house anymore. Maybe they decide they need to sell the big house to be able to retire. And then they come to our properties as a way of kind of saving some money. We love them because they really take care of the property. We're actually doing a couple of projects at the moment that are focused primarily on over 50-year-old kind of women to create a different kind of sense of community. So those are the people we rent to. Bit of a long-winded answer, like many of them, but I thought it'll make sense to cover that. Now, the next question comes from Instagram from Happy Gilmore Girl. Shireen. Hey, Shireen, how you doing? I hope everything is a lot warmer where you are than where we are here. Feels like a little bit of freedom. How's the rooming house demand return going compared to 6 to 12 months ago? Shireen, that's a question we get a lot. I'll tell you why. Pretty lately, particularly with high interest rates, we've got lots of people who've been hearing about alternative investments, who've been looking about high cash flow. Even though we've been doing this for many, many years, there's plenty of people who are just discovering it. But as you get to know more about rooming houses, as you get to understand the strategy a little bit more, it's naturally excited, or people get naturally excited about doing these projects. There's also a couple of learning communities that some of us are kind of members of that have highlighted and really made a push to us this strategy. So it's not uncommon for people to hear lots and lots of other people thinking about doing rooming houses in certain circles. The reality, however, is that those circles are only a small proportion of the overall investor community. So not everyone is actually investing in rooming houses. Therefore, the supply of rooming houses is still tiny. In Victoria at the moment, there's about 1,600 rooming houses in the whole of Victoria, which sounds like a whole lot until you compare it with millions of houses kind of out there in the state. So you're talking about less than a fraction of 1%. So there's no supply, and because there's no supply of this type of product, the demand is incredibly high, and to be honest, it won't be met for a long time. So I think it's probably now as good a time as it's ever been, if not better, to kind of invest in this type of strategy, particularly because a lot of the other strategies out there that have worked in the past, renovations, development, normal buy and holds, are working even less now because obviously of the high interest rates. All right, so next question is from Benny. Benny says, how many rooms should I build in the rooming house? Great question. We're going down to the technical details. So this is super good. This is actually what these sessions are for. We don't get a lot of opportunity to talk about these properties to kind of this level of detail. It's not a super simple answer, so I'm going to try to make my best here for this kind of question without notice. So we tend to build, in Victoria, you can build rooming houses all the way up to 9 rooms while taking advantage of the planning exemption that we have from the state government that allows us to build rooming houses without a planning permit. I think one of the things that it's not super well understood is that while you can build rooming houses with more rooms than 9, you'll have to go and get a building permit. A planning permit, which means that now you need to go through a process that is much more tedious, that gives the council complete control over your project, and that ultimately exposes you to a number of risks. So on the upper side, we tend to do up to 9, what we call studios, right, or studio-style rooms. So those are 9 bedrooms, 9 bathrooms, 9 kitchenettes. So effectively, each studio has its own ensuite and its own kitchenette, and then obviously a common area with a bigger kitchen and a laundry, a common laundry. So that's on the upper end. However, there's nothing saying that every rooming house should have 9 studios or 9 rooms. You can build smaller properties. And in fact, we find a whole bunch of investors who are maybe starting on their journey or maybe just don't have the resources to go and build a full 9 studio rooming house who have kind of taken advantage of kind of smaller properties, right? So on the opposite end, we normally tend to find that about 5 bedrooms or 5 studios, it's kind of probably the minimum that allows us to have a pretty decent return based on the economies of scale. You technically can do, 2, 3, 4 bedrooms, but we find that those properties are now too small to be economically feasible. So 5 studios, it's kind of the sweet spot from that sort of smaller size, because we find it's obviously the construction cost is a lot lower, the project is a lot more accessible, but also it allows certain advantages and certain facilities, I guess, around financing that come with that type of design and with that type of property. Financing is obviously one of the chapters that we cover here later in the book. We talk about all these types of financing, and in that chapter particularly, we talk about why 5 studios and how those 5 studios facilitate the financing side of things. However, it's also important to say that rooming house is well and truly something that is subject to economies of scale. So the bigger the rooming house, the better the returns tend to be as a percentage of the investment. But for those who cannot quite invest in a 9 studio rooming house just yet, there are smaller alternatives that are kind of available. Benny, I hope that answered your question. Again, pretty long answer, but I thought it makes sense to kind of cover that as well. Now let's look around. So we have nothing on Instagram. We have a question here via Facebook, but I think coming via Facebook. It's actually coming through the feed. So I'm not sure about this one, but I'll read anyway and I'll have a go. When interest rates are coming down, listen, it's no secret to anybody that interest rates have been probably one of the biggest pains in the life of many investors over the last 2 or 3 years. It's been incredibly painful for lots of people, me included. Almost every investor out there is hurting. And we're all desperate for the interest rates to come down. Now, I'll start by saying that I'm not an economist or financial analyst. I don't work for a bank or any of those things. So what I'm about to share is my opinion as an investor. It's kind of the way I'm acting based on my own portfolio and based on my own financial drivers. But I'm happy to share that opinion with you. And if it's useful to you, then great. Uh, if it's not useful to you, well, then you probably should do your own research anyway before you make any decision. I believe that we're well and truly at the top of the market in terms of interest rates. I don't think interest rates are going up anymore from here. Uh, um, that said, obviously, no one has a crystal ball and no one can really predict the future. But we have a lot of indications, a lot of um, actual signals that tell us that that might be the case. I also think that interest rates will come down relatively soon, and we're already seeing signals internationally that that's probably some of the stuff that is about to happen. In the next kind of little while. You have countries like the UK that just lower interest rates or are in the process of lowering interest rates. Pretty soon, banks are already starting to price some of that in. You have already the Americans talking in the United States about lowering interest rates in the immediate future. Many people think that it's imminent and it'll just be, it's obviously over there a little bit convoluted by the presidential election and campaigns and things like that. But many analysts seem to think that is kind of an imminent thing to happen. And then, generally speaking, when that happens, Australia is not too far behind. We obviously have some political kind of considerations over here, both in terms of the Reserve Bank trying to assert their independence, and the political parties trying to put pressure on their own end, and opposition and things like that. So some of that might play a role around timing, but I think that is kind of definitely the case. Now, I reckon we'll all be super happy when interest rates start to normalize. Hopefully, they don't turn these big growth curve that we've had into something that starts to move in the right direction, because obviously, a lot of the macroeconomic drivers that drive things like interest rates and the like will ultimately also have an impact on things like construction cost and unemployment rates and things like that. Anyway, just my humble opinion as an investor. Nothing really to do with rooming houses, at least not directly. It's a kind of a broader question. But of course, when interest rates start to come down, the return of investors are going to be better, and many of them, including me, are probably going to be happier because we're going to be kind of making more money. All right. So, and I don't know if we have any kind of final questions coming in. Let's go have one more look through my feeds just to make sure that we kind of haven't missed anything. Yeah, that's positive. All right, so I think that's about it. Someone here asking me the question. Yeah, very good question. So, as you guys probably have known, if you're watching this live, you've probably seen some of our other social media channels. We are holding a live online and in-person event to launch the book on the 3rd of September. So the book obviously physically already kind of here. We have a few copies, but it's going to be available to everybody on the 3rd of September. I think it's already on Amazon, and it'll be available on Kindle, super cheap. You'll be able to get a copy. There's really no, there's not this part of my mission is not necessarily a profit driver, but again, available on the 3rd of September. We're going to have an event that night. Some of you might have seen the announcement of it. Some of you might have visited the website, have a look at the details. I know many of you have registered already. I'm getting the question around coming in person versus versus streaming online. We're going to do both. So we're going to be streaming the event using very similar technology to what we're using today, obviously in a bigger space up in the auditorium, similar to some of the other kind of bigger events that we've done in the past. It's going to be kind of streamed through most of our social channels. Whatever you're seeing this now, we'll be streaming through there. I think we're doing Facebook and Instagram and LinkedIn and YouTube. There you go. So there'll be that. Now, for an exclusive group of people, you also have the opportunity to come in person. We already have a significant number of our clients who have agreed to come here, particularly those who live in Victoria. We have plenty that obviously live interstate and overseas that won't be able to attend. Some of them are actually flying for it, but many of them won't be able to be here, network with a bunch of investors, share on the day, a bunch of informal conversations, as well as to attend the actual presentation we're going to do kind of in person. There's going to be an opportunity for people who register to also come here in person. It's going to be a bit of a kind of secondary process. So if you go to that website and go put your details and registered, you are actually registering for the option of both the online and the in-person event. And then, again, like I said, closer to the day, we'll give you the details of both of those. You'll have the opportunity to confirm your attendance in person, if that's kind of something you want to do. Or if you prefer to watch the event live from the comfort of your own home, or from work, or from the bar, maybe, you'll be able to access that. So, yeah, just again, to answer your question, you'll be able to select which of the two are convenient to you. That decision will come a little bit later. We're decided to give people a little bit of a heads up so they can plan with the kids and the wives and the husbands and the family, if it makes sense to be here in person and take advantage of not only the presentation but also the networking and the connection with people, or if you prefer to attend online. One last look to see if we have any final kind of questions. I don't think there's anything else. We've been going for about half an hour, so I reckon we've answered some of the key ones. There's plenty of other questions that are answered inside the book. Also, watch out, a little bit of a sneak peek of the book coming up pretty soon. More details will be published around here somewhere in social media about how can you get either a copy of the book or participate in the kind of pre-launch preview kind of the book. So you'll be able to potentially get access to a lot of the information that is available here well before anybody else. And we've already got some pretty good comments about about the opportunity to do that. If no one else has any more questions, I might send you back to your families. It's pretty late in the afternoon and early evening. I'm pretty sure many of you have other stuff planned for the night, and I think we'll leave it here. Thank you, Sherry. Hopefully that was kind of useful. Plus everyone else that is watching in all the channels. I look forward to seeing many of you very, very soon at the launch event. In the meanwhile, feel free to continue posting your questions down as comments of this video if you're watching the replay. We'll probably do a couple of these ones along the way if there is enough interest. Look forward to seeing many of you very, very soon. Enjoy, take care, and have a good night.